Thanks to the bad faith, chaos, and dysfunction of congressional Republicans, a probable government shutdown is only days away with serious consequences for the American people. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, so again, we are nearing a government shutdown thanks to Republicans in the House of Representatives. I want to clarify, I don't mean Republicans in the Senate, who have actually been surprisingly good faith and bipartisan working with Senate Democrats, and not because of President Biden in the White House. It's because of Republicans in the House of Representatives, thanks to the chaotic leadership of Kevin McCarthy and the craziness that's going on within the MAGA far-right Freedom Caucus. Okay, this is an issue with one aspect of the Republican Party in one chamber. They're holding it all up. And what's that mean? It means in about, I think, 2 weeks, really at the end of the month, the government will run out of money to fund its operations for the next fiscal year. Now, I want to clarify, this is not the same thing or nowhere near as problematic potentially as the debt ceiling crisis that we faced a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. But this is pretty serious because unless they can agree to a budget, but in Congress, so Democrats and Republicans in both chambers, and get it to the president to sign, many, many, many government operations and subsidies and support will cease to exist in this government shutdown until the budget is approved. So that's material harm for the American people. I want to play a clip from Democratic Congressman, a freshman named Maxwell Frost, who kind of lays the situation out pretty well in about 70 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today because the American people are getting a front row seat at the circus that Speaker Kevin McCarthy and extremists in the Republican Party are unleashing on our country. We are 15 days away from a government shutdown that will impact millions of working people, and Speaker Kevin McCarthy cannot even get his own party to pass any significant pieces of legislation. And the cherry on top of all of this is that instead of getting to work to fund the government, they're trying to impeach Hunter Biden, I think, which, spoiler alert, is not the president of the United States. This speaker doesn't even have the votes for impeachment, doesn't have the votes to fund the government. It's unclear whether or not he even has the votes to keep his own job. Kevin McCarthy doesn't even know what Kevin McCarthy stands for, because it sure looks like his morals and beliefs about how this place should run only apply when other people are holding the gavel. So America, in 15 days from now, when our country comes to a halt, remember who did this to you. Speaker Kevin McCarthy and the extremist House Republicans who care more about themselves and their politics than you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Well said, Congressman Frost. Again, this is a uniquely Republican problem in one particular chamber. Again, Mitch McConnell and his crew, as chaotic as they can be and as bad faith as they can be, they're not even the problem here. They've been able to work on budget proposals and budget resolutions with Senate Democrats pretty darn well. It's congressional Republicans. Now, in terms of a government shutdown, again, it's not quite the same thing as a debt ceiling crisis. And there's a great website, and it's actually even relatively conservative. It's a Committee for a Responsible Fiscal Budget in Washington. They have a great primer on, what a government shutdown is and the potential implications, what services would not be affected, which services would. And it says here, and we won't go through the whole thing, but although many programs are exempt, the public is still likely to feel the impact of a shutdown in several ways. For example, in a full shutdown, there would be Social Security and Medicare would be affected. Checks are sent out, but benefit verification as well as card issuance would cease. Environmental and food inspection, that would be affected. National parks, air travel, health and human services, the IRS, which is the only revenue positive function of government, actually makes the government money by getting the tax revenue that the government is owed. SNAP assistance, this is a big one. So, low-income houses that, or families that require federal subsidies for food, for assistance, child care, child subsidies, they would also be affected. This would have sweeping implications for millions upon millions of Americans. Then even with respect to the economy, there's a potential risk there. I was going to play a clip, but I won't go through it. But the long and short of it is even financial experts say that though the widespread economic impacts are probably going to be modest if the shutdown occurs, just based on historic shutdowns, there's still a risk that we could, based on all of the economic shenanigans we've experienced, particularly with the debt ceiling escalation from Republicans just a few months ago, that the U.S. credit score could be affected by this particular shutdown because we've basically gambled with the U.S. credit in the past several months because of Republican escalation. So this particular shutdown could have more weight attached to it. Folks, this is unnecessary. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. This is because the Republican Party, particularly again in the House of Representatives, is not a serious governing party. It's not a serious governing institution. They want to wield the gavel of the speakership and wield the majority to pursue partisan political witch hunts. Like Maxwell Frost said, they're so much more focused on hurting Joe Biden politically. They do not care. Or also defunding the various investigations or the Department of Justice because they see the Department of Justice, which is trying to hold criminals accountable, which means sometimes Republicans get held accountable because occasionally Republicans engage in crimes or potential crimes. If we can't, they want to focus on defunding the Department of Justice. They won't agree to funding the federal government unless the investigations, they say the special counsel's office and Jack Smith are not funded. Things like that. I mean, just it's political witch hunts against President Biden. It is trying to remove Republicans from any sort of accountability if they engage in crimes. That's what they want to do. And they are willing, eager even, to grind the gears of government to a halt. And again, it's not abstract, right? I know a lot of people out there might be thinking, oh, what's the big deal? So this committee or that committee can't meet. No. This can have a material impact on the lives of millions of Americans, particularly those who need government assistance the most. And this is all a vanity project, and it's all because of the chaos and bad faith within the Republican conference in the House of Representatives. So we've got, like I said, about 2 weeks to avoid this. There's no telling, if we can. It looks increasingly likely because Kevin McCarthy is too weak to exert any leadership. Donald Trump, the true leader of the GOP, has absolutely no interest in helping avert a shutdown whatsoever because it could potentially hurt President Biden politically, even though, honestly, it's probably going to hurt Republicans more politically because Republicans have been the source of most of the shutdowns in modern history. It happened under President Clinton. It happened under President Obama. It happened again now potentially under President Biden. And in those instances, Republicans experienced most of the public backlash because they were seen as basically trying to use government funding to extort a Democratic president, which is basically the case. So historically speaking, it's probably going to backfire on the GOP. But Donald Trump doesn't care, right? Because he's not in office. It's not going to hurt him. It would either hurt Biden or it's going to hurt congressional Republicans. And they're cannon fodder to him. So anyway, this is just a really ridiculous situation, and it's all testament to the GOP's inability to be a serious, responsible governing party, even for their own constituents.